Watchmen, Air, Land and Sea, and the Mooseman. This is Staying In.
Are you alright?
Yeah, are you okay, Pete? You look like you're about to have a poo.
How would you describe Pete's face, though?
I don't know, but the fact he's been sitting in a dressing gown, is this... Is the heating not working?
I thought it was just like a hoodie. You're in a dressing gown.
Yeah, I'm in a dressing gown, mate. Yeah.
It's like he looks like he's wearing the robes of a Jedi Knight.
Yeah.
Oh, he's not got the Wellingtons again, has he?
No, or he shot Bungle on Safari.
Yeah. Oh, poor Bungle.
Oh.
Yeah, no, this is... So I am in my dressing gown because I was a little bit chilly, and I thought to myself, you know what? I'm going to treat myself, get into my dressing gown, pull it all over me, feel a little bit luxurious, and treat myself. Basically, treat myself to a little bit more dressing gown time than
usual.
Because I look back at our history.
Whose history? What, a civilization?
Do you mean like the podcast, or kind of like humankind?
This humankind, and specifically British humankind. And you look at smoking jackets, right?
Yeah.
And whenever I see smoking jackets and cravats and all that sort of stuff, they're all just trying to keep warm, but they're also thinking, oh, this feels nice. And I'm sort of thinking that the dressing gown here could be a sort of substitute for the smoking jacket.
A bit like the smoking jacket for the concerned British citizen.
That's right, yeah. I wouldn't, I wouldn't go out to Tesco's in my smoking jacket, but I sure would in my dressing gown. I just find it luxurious, and sometimes I think that's all you need, really.
Would you? Okay, I want to try and find the limits of your dressing gown wearing. These are the limits of where Pete is prepared to wear
the threshold,
or in what situation he's prepared to wear dressing gown. So,
sure.
Answering the door to someone you know.
Yes.
Okay. Happy for a dressing gown.
Happy.
Okay. Answering the door to someone you're expecting but you don't know. So someone's going to read the gas meter or fix a hole in the ceiling, or
okay. Well, if they're coming in to do a job, I would be up and dressed and all that sort of stuff. However, if it's like an Amazon delivery person, I'd be like, yes, that's fine. Otherwise, I would get fully dressed for something like that.
I think it's important that we clarify. In these scenarios, Pete is obviously wearing his dressing gown. I think it is essential that we find out what is underneath the dressing gown. Because him opening the door to an Amazon man in a dressing gown and like jeans and t-shirt is one thing.
Yeah.
Him opening the door to an Amazon man in nothing but the dressing gown is a completely different story.
I mean, we all know that Pete goes to bed dressed like Scrooge.
Yeah.
With like the hats and everything.
And a candle.
Yeah. No, I'd be fine either with some Jimmy Jams on underneath or nothing on underneath. I'd be absolutely fine. And in fact, actually, when you open the door in your dressing gown, you get a nice little breeze if there's nothing...
Like Marilyn Monroe?
Yeah, essentially. Not quite as beautiful and sort of visually provocative. Well, I mean, very visually provocative, but...
The main problem I find whenever I'm in that situation is... You lose the security of the hand against the knot.
Yeah.
So when you've got to take a package and sign for it at the same time, suddenly you've lost the security, almost the biological belt. You make for yourself by holding your hand on the knot when you open the door.
Yeah.
So then suddenly there's like capacity for open viewing.
There is, and also the other person, the person who's giving you the parcel, because they also know that this is a situation, they now feel like the heightened DEFCON level of...
No, I just figured something out.
What's that?
I just figured something out. Pete, the only reason Pete does this is that he likes that thrill. Don't you admit it's the only reason that you're doing any of this is you just started ordering stuff from Amazon, just like, oh yeah, it's gonna make me sign for that, isn't he? Oh yeah, they're gonna come and maybe they'll see something.
Oh, fantastic. Here's those 4 Bic pens. Anyway, let me sign it. What do I need to say?
Oh, I appear to have dropped my pen.
I basically went for the longest time where I would be either either, if once I'd got dressed, I was like fully dressed and that was it for the rest of the day. But I never really got into like loungewear. I've never really had loungewear. Do you guys have loungewear or anything like that?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I know Kris has his scrubs that he wears sometimes.
Yeah, I lived with 4 radiographers and they stole me a pair of scrubs from the hospital. I mean, these were clean ones.
Yeah. I've got like, are they tracksuit bottoms? The clothy.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Sort of like like you've got pillows on your legs. Just nice.
Great.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah.
Dan, where you at?
Every year for Christmas, my parents get me a new set of loungewear, and it's amazing. I look forward to it every single year. It's genuinely one of my favourite things I get at Christmas is my new set of loungewear.
It grows so fast, that's why.
That's amazing. Oh, that's beautiful. You see, I think that's nice. And again, it's all about taking that moment. Because again, I didn't really do any of that, but it's moving into that mindset of thinking, you know what? I'm going to treat myself and just relax a little bit more. I'm in my own home. If I want to wear my Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles tracky bottoms, I will.
Yeah.
Right, gents. First, there was the Spider-Man.
Yes.
Then
go on.
we had the Batman.
Oh, okay. So now we're gonna have. Hang on. What's next? Spiders. Then if you turn all the legs into, if you put all the legs together, you get wings. That's the bat.
Mm-hmm.
But then that's how the Spider-Man turns into the Batman. But then if the bat puts those wings behind him,
The Raven Man.
the Raven Man.
Is it Raven Man, Kris?
No, Pete, it's the Mooseman. DC present. And that's Moose with double O, not O-U-S, just in case anyone was wondering. It's not a very delicate human being.
Is this a
Oh, I love a trifle.
is this a TV series or a comic?
This is
or...
a video game that came out in 2017 from Vladimir Beletsky and Mikhail Shyakov. And I took a run at your names there, and I do apologise if I've butchered them. It's a single-player game, which I've got for my brand new and still shiny Nintendo Switch Lite, but you can get it on most consoles, I think. It basically is a game which is centered around a myth that I know very little about. The Finno-Ugric culture, which in modern day, it encompasses aspects of Russia. There's some Hungarian in there, but it's the kind of Finnish kind of culture, like up in that North Scandinavian part of the world.
It's based around Perma,
Yeah.
essentially, which is in Russia.
Yeah, so that kind of that northern kind of region, really. And it does that wonderful thing that myths do, and I've become quite interested in these mainstream popularized retellings of myths. I didn't realize how interested I was in that until I started reading Mythos, and I'm reading Heroes currently, Stephen Fry's sequel. I've read Neil Gaiman's Norse, and yeah, this taps into another mythos really, and you realize that there is a kind of a mono myth where you can see similarities starting to manifest in their Genesis stories, say, for example. And you, as the character, you play as the Mooseman, who is this mythical creature who flies, and he can move through the 3 different worlds, the underworld and the kind of middle world, and you can guess the other one. And what I really, really like about this game is that you could just play it a bit like Old Man Journey. You just move from one side of the screen to another, interacting in a very light touch manner with what you encounter there, these tiny, very easy puzzles, and you just go on this really interesting journey and taking these very incredibly cave painting-like evocative visuals that you encounter, where, like, for example, you'll go into the subterranean cave and there's these chalk eyes that just blink open and shut as you walk past, or into these expansive deserts. I've not completed it yet. I know, Sam, you have, so I'd be quite curious to know where it goes.
Shall I ruin it for
you? Don't ruin a myth.
Is it actually just a man in a moose suit?
Yeah, it just unzips it at the end and puts on his smoking jacket. But I'm wondering, like, I was a bit worried that it didn't seem to me that aesthetically its colour palette wasn't changing that much. I've got to that bit now where I go to this kind of expansive desert and it's suddenly become these kind of browns and yellows, as it were. but it felt quite like white chalk on a kind of a very dark background. Let's say a lot of high contrast there. But it's interesting. It's quite arresting, I would say.
Yeah, that's a look it's gone for. I mean, I've put up some videos using the fantastic share button on the Nintendo Switch on my Twitter feed.
Right, we get it.
At Mr. Sam Turner, you can go and see those videos there.
Never misses a chance.
And actually, if you look at them, it's a great representation of what this game is able to do with its visual style. I think for me, the game has got like a couple of like little niggles. I don't think the port over to the Switch has been.
No, I agree.
Fantastic, but it has such an arresting visual style, and it does this wonderful, simple thing. Like the central mechanic of the game is that you press A to put on your moose head, and when you put on your moose head, you're able to make this connection, which essentially is this world of myths and legends. So when you walk into a cave as a normal person, you see all these etchings on the wall, and they don't really mean anything. But when you put on your moose's head, suddenly, like, those paintings and those etchings come alive, and it's this wonderful visual interpretation about our understanding of the world, and how when we try and understand a lot more about the world and the creation of it, and try to understand this language, these things suddenly become alive, and we're able to almost scratch beyond the layer. And just that simple method of like taking off and putting on this moose mask, and how you turn from just a normal man to suddenly to someone who's very much connected with this world of mythos, is a really powerful thing. Like, it's very, very simply, like, there's a scene where you're essentially floating amongst the stars, and it's incredible. And then you put on the moose head, and it paints a picture of all the animals and beings within the constellations. It's demonstrating that level of understanding. Like, some people can look at the stars, and other people can look at the stars, and have real connection with creation. And being able to do that just by that little mechanic and make it such an arresting image is where Mooseman is kind of at its peak. And also, the myth is exceptionally compelling. Like, it's brilliant. What I love about myths is when myths go to extreme degrees to explain the normal.
Yeah.
So there's a bit in it where it explains why tree branches crack in the night, and I just love that kind of thing.
It's beautiful.
You can see that child in a bed who can't sleep or is scared because of the trees cracking in the night. And so this myth has been created around that. This story has been embellished from, well, this is why. These two beings, they fight in the night in the woods, these two gods.
I love that.
And that's why they crack in the night. It's wonderful.
I've been listening to a really long lecture series on the world mythologies. And it's really interesting to see how many of them are so similar, like how they all have this kind of root in just fundamental things like wanting to explain why we have night and day, or why we're here, or like how we were given fire, like lots and lots of those different mythologies cover these different things in really interesting different ways. But also just to kind of see how also different and based on geography, those myths actually are. So, like, thinking about the Australasian, the native people in Australia, seeing how they see how time works is very different to how the Greeks saw how time works. There's lots of, like, seeing time as a linear progression is a very, like, Western thing, whereas you go and look in lots of different places in the world and it's all actually quite cyclical. And that's really fascinating. And I think that there's so much ground and scope to make really cool things based on these myths. I mean, there's so many super cool weird ones out there that stuff like this gets me really excited.
I don't have to worry about copyright either.
Christ almighty. I mean, I was thinking when I was playing it, like, are video games the best medium to talk about, to like bring like those myths to life? Because there's just certain things that video games can do with mechanics and visuals that no other medium can do, which in terms of giving you an understanding of how these myths fit into the world and how it actually appears.
I think their structure also is really is really useful, right? So there's been a post recently by Ian Bogost, who's a very, very well respected, works in academia in video games. One of the things he talks about is how games kind of, unlike films, they keep everything in. There aren't really cuts. So, for example, when you're playing something like Uncharted, in a movie like Indiana Jones, the sequence might be very quickly chopped together, and you would see Indy, say for example he wanted to walk across a room and pick up an object. He would maybe stand up from the chair, start to begin walking, and then maybe the cut would be going to the object and picking it up. You wouldn't actually have the walk across the room. Whereas in games, not very often you end up with cuts. Most of the time there's a continual narrative, continual control of the avatar on screen. And I think that argument about games aside, mythology is very much about often the progress of an individual. So especially in stuff like Greek myth, there's a lot about Jason and the Argonauts. Jason has this huge adventure, and it's a lot about they do this, and then they do this, and then they do this, and it's all about a continual progression throughout a story. And I think actually you're right, Sam. I think games can be really good at that because you're with that person for a really long time.
But I love that. I love that kind of that bleeding point where it's kind of what Sam was alluding to, where like why the trees make that, the tree branches make that sound, is that you're on the cusp of something fictive, but because it's grounded in something that is in front of you that you encounter on a daily basis. It is like you're not at that stage where you can put on the Mooseman helmet and see that hidden layer beneath it, the workings behind it. There's the Greek myth, isn't there, of how the peacock got its tails. I mean, you could almost I'd happily read a whole book where each chapter was one of those little short, almost like children's stories, narratives. For example, my brother's got a book. My brother read a book as a child that it's his favourite book. He hasn't. He's read some books, but like he hasn't read that many. And whatever. Some people like reading, some people don't. But the book he read as a child was How the Mole Got His Car, and
well, that's a myth I can get behind.
Yeah, I mean, obviously more of a modern day myth.
Yeah,
but just the idea of reverse engineering that how the mole got his car, I just think is adorable, and it's like in secret questions for accounts and things, when it'll say things like favorite book, he'll just put how the mole got his car.
Oh, dude. Oh, that's funny.
Do you think any kids listen to our podcast, like, at all? Do you think anybody, like?
I mean, I wouldn't stop at kids, Pete.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you mean by kids? Why is that the kind of demographic you're shooting for?
Well, because do you reckon, how like everyone's always like, you got to get the demo, like Ninja. You got to get the Ninja demographic. You got to get the people who are watching Ninja play Fortnite on Mixer.
What's the Ninja demographic?
I see, the fact that you don't know, mate.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that you don't know just proves that that's not for them. It's not for them. Like,
is it a Fortnite thing?
Yeah, it's a Fortnite thing. Yeah,
I was talking to my nephew the other day, and I was talking to him about games. I think he's 10. I was like, "Are you still playing Fortnite?" He's like, "Oh no, Fortnite's dead now." I'm like, "What?"
It's dead to me.
I thought Fortnite was this like massive thing. Is it not a thing anymore? It's like, nah, it's dead now. I'm like, oh.
All right, Dan. So, in an effort for us to capture the youth, what have we got to talk about?
What's the new hotness, Dan?
Yeah, what's the new hotness?
Well, the new hotness that he's enjoying, the game he's playing a lot of at the moment, because he does have very responsible parents who will not give him inappropriate games. So the game he's currently playing is Plants vs. Zombies Garden Warfare.
I was about to say, that's a massive game now.
Which
It's
is a
huge.
massive game. And it's not like the Plants and Zombies I remember, which was the kind of
No.
the mobile, like 2D kind of left to right kind of strategy game. It's now like a first-person shooter battle royale. It's mental.
Mm.
But yeah, that's the new jam, lads. That's the new heat on the street. That's a phrase I've just made up.
Yeah, sounds very cool. Well,
I look forward to the Grand Force DLC.
And there's Kris just pulling us away from the ninja demographic.
When Alan Titchmarsh and Charlie Dimmock are commentators on the e-sporting event that is the World League.
Oh, I've seen he's got a headshot there.
Oh, I don't think he planned that turf war very well, did he, Charlie? And then there's a Cockney one. What was his name? Tommy. Was it just Tommy?
Tommy.
Yeah, I think it was just Tommy. He's like Madonna.
Yeah, well, sure. My way of knowing that I'm not cool is with my students, where I use expressions like even the other day I said in a lecture, I just said I described something as that's pretty sweet, and I just heard them whispering, some of them saying "sweet," and it's like he thinks he can get away with saying
Like
a
a
word
murmur
like that.
just ripples across the classroom.
Yeah,
I was
did
like-
he just say sweet?
Now, do we think that was them saying he said a word we use, or was that a like, oh my god, is this the 17th century? Like,
The latter.
I think the latter, definitely. Yeah.
it's amazing.
I mean,
bless
I
you,
did
Kris.
once describe something as dope, and I only said it once in it, and I just felt that ripple throughout the room and thought, not saying that again.
Yeah.
Also,
yeah,
the other thing you do, Kris, and it's become so synonymous with you now that whenever we have food together, we always take the mick out of you. In fact, it's actually gone beyond mick taking and become
Bullying.
a shorthand for if we really like a dish. So whenever we like some food now, we do the finger slapping thing.
Oh,
That you do, because Kris always does that when he likes something. You're just like, Kris, do you like it? And it'd be like,
was that what Ali G?
Oh, that was like high school.
yeah, that's Ali G.
I can't do the finger slapping thing. What I'm actually doing is I'm just pointing to the dish to just
That's
gesture.
the thing. It's just you can't do it. So you're just there pointing to the dish, trying to do something that you can't do.
No, it's like I'm whisking an egg without the whisk or the egg.
Just say, I'm having a really lovely meal. Thank you.
Well, I'm coming round to yours for food on Saturday night, so
Yeah, but we're having takeout, so
all right.
What's the plan for when you guys are hanging out? What are you gonna? So you're gonna get takeout. That's important.
oh yeah.
It's the annual Turner Spooky Games Night.
It's the annual Turner Spooky Games Night.
Okay.
We're working on a snappier title.
How many kind of annual nights or days do you have? Because you've got War Games Day, War Boys.
Me and Kris, Kris and I have War Boys.
Yep.
Yeah.
So once a year we put aside a day to
Dress in the suits of armour.
Yeah.
exclusively play war games.
Uh-huh.
So this Saturday will be our traditional annual Spooky Games Night, where we just specifically play games that have a spooky theme. We've got other non-scary games to play, so I'm going to try and entice Kris and his partner around earlier on in the day before it gets dark to get those out the way.
Yeah.
And then once the lights dim,
Yeah.
and we've eaten Chinese food,
Spoilers.
then we'll get our spook on. But we have actually got, as well as Medium being a new addition to our spooky games list, we have actually got a new game which is a new addition to our War Boys games list.
Oh, it's great. It's a great opener, isn't it, to the War Boys Day?
War Boys.
War
So
Boys.
at the moment we've got what have we got? We've got Memoir 44.
Yep.
We've got V Commandos.
Yep.
If we want to extend War Boys into a weekend, we've got War of the Ring,
Yep. It's in the title.
Hunt for the Ring, and what's the other one?
Battle of Five Armies.
Battle of the Five Armies. So we've got like 6 great war games that we play when we have a War Boys Day. But the new one we've got, and Kris is absolutely right that it's a a great opener is called Air, Land and Sea. And so, Pete, you've played Shot and Totten, haven't you? You played Battle Line.
Yes, I have. Very good.
So you're very familiar with the concept of you've got essentially cards in the middle of the table and you're up against a single opponent and you're battling to gain control of those cards that are in the middle of the table.
Yes.
Well, Air, Land and Sea works in a similar sort of way, but it's a lot more condensed. So in Shot and Totten, you're fighting over 9 stones in the middle, or battle line, whatever you want to call it. But Air, Land and Sea, you and your opponent are only fighting over those 3. So essentially the 3 theatres of war, Air, Land and Sea. The artwork in this game is really evocative. Like, it looks very sort of 1940s. There's like 1940s patriotic posters that they had around the time. So the game is quite simple, really. Each player has a hand of 6 cards out of a possible 18. They won't draw any more cards until the end of the round. And you take it in turns to play cards down. Each card has a certain value and a certain special ability on it as well that may allow you to adjust what's going on either side of the theatre. And at the end of the round, whoever controls the most theatre by essentially having the most points value on either side will win that battle, gets 6 points. The first to 12 points wins. So it's pretty simple.
As in life.
It's pretty simple. But it has this wonderful, lovely little spice to the game where, as a player, you have 3 actions. You either deploy, which is put a card down for its face value and its ability in the specific theatre that it belongs in. You either improvise, which is to turn the card face up, and every card when put down as an improvisational card can go anywhere, but it's only ever worth 2 points. Or you can withdraw. You can say, I'm not going to win this battle. I've looked at everything I've got. I'm just not going to win. And based on the number of cards left in your opponent's hands is the amount of points that they will win. So essentially, you can say right at the start of the bat, I'm not going to win this. And your opponent, instead of getting 6 points, will just get 1. And then you can go, right, shuffle all the cards back in. Let's go again. So what is, on the face of it, a very, very simple numbers game suddenly becomes this really interesting push your luck game, but also it's a game about deception and bluffing your opponent. And when Kris and I were playing it, I thought, oh, this is kind of, it's like a jolly little thing. And then, playing that card, oh, I'm winning that one, and oh, Kris is winning that one. And then suddenly it was like, hang on, it's too late for me to withdraw. And I know I can't win. So I know that Kris is going to win. And it was at that moment when I realised that, this game really has something a little bit extra to it. Like, it feels like it's a game that has really high stakes. The fact that you can actually use the act of withdrawing as a real tactical strategy. It's not just there to get you out of a bind. You can actually use it to benefit you, but you can also use it to stop your opponent from actually claiming the full points for winning the whole battle, as it were. So you've got this really interesting 2-player experience. I know on the last pod we talked very much about like those 2-player games being a very intimate thing and a very intimate experience. And when you've got a game like Air, Land and Sea where it feels like it's got really high stakes, it feels like you can be doing really good work in terms of like putting down your cards, but you're always living under the fear that like my opponent could withdraw at any point.
Yeah.
Or I could withdraw at any point. And when you play a game where like the sway of the game can either really heavily tilt from one way to another, but also it has this really like slow drift sometimes. Like me and Kris played around where I just like won the first battle and I'm halfway to victory. But like slowly but surely, Kris started clawing it back and clawing it back and clawing it back, just like because cleverly making me withdraw. I guess what I'm trying to say is that feeling of uncertainty, that even though that you know that you've got a good hand of cards, the game does enough to just give that sort of underlying sense of uncertainty and unease, that you're never quite sure what your opponent is going to do, and at any moment they can just like put the brakes on, withdraw, and then suddenly you're in a completely different situation. That's really, really interesting.
Oh, it's really crunchy, and the longer I spend away from playing the game, the more I'm thinking about it, and the more I really, really enjoyed it. Because these cards have particular abilities. Sam said that, okay, you can choose to put the card face down, and by default, I think it has a score of 4, is it, Sam, on the back, or is it 2? When you put the
2.
Yeah, it has a default score of 2, but I put that card face down. Sam doesn't know what card is under there. He just sees a 2 on the top. And the reason why that's significant is that some of these cards do have abilities, and those abilities might be that when you play another card, it may say flip any card on the battlefield, and that could be both on my half or Sam's half. So I could reveal the card that I had face down as this kind of Trojan horse, and it's a 6. Or I could flip over Sam's big numbered card back to what is by default a 2. And also, when you look in your hand and you see, oh, hang on, I've only got air cards and sea cards. I've got nothing in land. Well, that's fine, because some of the cards you can play can allow you to move your cards when you've played them in one theatre, move them into another theatre. So you're thinking about this as a spatial puzzle as well. So you're stacking up dominoes and you're trying to second guess your opponent. Well, if I put this face down now, Sam may actually inadvertently flip it, thinking he's hindering me, but actually he's playing totally to my advantage without himself realising. And to have all that with 6 cards in your hand, and knowing full well, okay, if I lose this round, it'll be done quickly. I can either withdraw or, wait it out and do it again, shuffle again. That never gets old for me. And I was really reticent to withdraw. It's like playing chess with somebody, and then, halfway through, they take all the pieces off the board and say, I'm calling it quits. Because
I think it's kind of plays against just general games in general. It's like I was playing Transistor the other day, and I got into a fight, and I lost one of my powers in something that had happened. It feels like cheating to like stop and reload a save to go back and stop that from happening. And that, I think that sort of bleeds into board games slightly, where you feel like you're playing against what the game is trying to do by saying, I'm not going to win this. I'm stopping it now, and I'm walking away. We're going to start this again. Like, it feels almost, what's it called in video games, where like rage quitting. It feels like, even though there's nothing in the box or in the rules that ever suggests like that. But I think it's only when you play it that you realise how much of a tactical advantage quitting at the right point can actually do for you as a player, where it becomes exceptionally interesting. And it's one of those things that more and more as I play games, I'm increasingly, both video games and board games, I'm more increasingly thinking about, should I be just like taking a step back here? Should I be really always committing and always like pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing? Would I not just benefit from sometimes just like stepping back away from this and just going, right, I'm going to let you have this and just try and like think a bit more tactically and strategically about like what is actually going on in this situation?
I find that really difficult as well, actually. And all the time, I always find myself going with like, shoot him, yeah, that'd be fun. Go forward, shoot them, like fight them. Whereas like actually in lots, and I lose a lot of games, in a lot of situations, there are times when I should have just been like fall back. And it's occasionally it feels like it's not fun to do that. But it is, but it is the strategically optimal thing to do. And I guess that's kind of where, in games like Air, Land and Sea, for example, or tabletop skirmish games like Burrows and Badgers, let's say, like it's actually a really hard thing to do. It's really, really difficult to get over that mindset of, well, roll a dice so that you can shoot again, or make sure that you're always charging forward, because we always think of progress as forward. We always think of doing better, of like always doing actions, whereas actually, as you say, sometimes in some games you just want to be like, actually, I'm going to let them come to me. I would love to know all about
What?
Well, this is not a. This is.
Go on.
This is,
put a question to the group. What do you want to know about?
Sam, do the jingle. Do the jingle.
this
do
is
the
not.
jingle,
Well, it's not a segue. I was literally like.
No, not a
Okay,
segue.
hang on. I'll get a note. What does Pete want to know? What does Pete want to know?
What does Pete want to know?
I would like to know why we might want to talk about Watchmen when that comic is like 30 years old, 40 years old now.
Because the comic is 30 years old, Pete, but the new TV series is about 2 days old.
Oh, are they doing? Oh, they've done a TV series. Let me put all of my preconceptions into my brain right now, because I'm telling you right now that anything beyond the Watchmen comic book, the original Watchmen comic book, I just immediately want to ignore.
Okay.
Like, so what is it? Is it a retelling of the original graphic novel?
No. That's the important thing. It's not that.
Is it the comics that they did afterwards?
No.
Is it set afterwards?
Yes.
Okay.
We've got a winner.
Would you like me to tell you what it is?
No, I like asking questions.
Okay.
So it's not none of it is set beforehand.
Some of it is set beforehand.
Oh, for God's sake. Okay, here's another question. Why should I care? what is it?
Why?
What is it that Watchmen as a TV series that is not sort of affiliated with the comic storyline, but sort of is, I guess. Like, what's it bringing? Why should I care to any degree whatsoever? And how does it make sure that it doesn't destroy the sanctity of one of the most important graphic novels of all time that DC refuse to stop mucking over Dave Gibbons and Alan Moore on? Like,
Okay, well, let me first answer your final question, which is...
There's subtext there, isn't there, Dan? I don't know.
Let me answer your final question of how did they not kind of screw over the original work?
yes.
This is created by Damon Lindelof, who in the past has written Lost and films like Prometheus, lots of kind of sci-fi, pop cultural kind of touchstones of recent years. Okay, very, very, very good writer, very creative, and a huge Watchmen fan. Okay. Now, what I'm about to say will make you roll your eyes, but stick with me, okay? He has described this as not necessarily being a remake, but being a remix. Okay. So what this? No. See, the eyes have rolled.
He didn't roll his eyes. It's just his head has just dropped into his hand.
What he has said is the original work, the original comics of Watchmen, is kind of untouchable.
Yeah,
that is canon. That happened in this world. It's all exists. No, not touching that at all. Okay, what happened in the comics happened in the comics. The film, nothing to do with that. Okay, because the film does do some different stuff, but nothing to do with that. So the film is not canon. So the series is set in modern day. So obviously, Watchmen, I think, was set in the 80s. Is that correct? Yeah. So that was set in the 80s. This is set modern day, so 2019. All the events of Watchmen happened back then as they do in the comic books. Notably, what happens in the comic books, not what happens in the film, because there's a fairly big difference at the end of those two.
Okay.
And it's set in a world where cops are now people who are hated and have to wear masks to protect their identity. They live in a world, and I'm going to give some of this information. It's not spoilery because it happens really early on. Links into the Watchmen in terms of there is a terrorist group who use the mask of Rorschach as their emblem. Again, feeding back into kind of elements from Watchmen. What the writers have said is they are producing this with some of the same themes of the original Watchmen. It's not the same story. There may be touchstones that you can say, okay, that's similar. They're taking this from here. They're taking this from here. My understanding, this isn't overly clear from the opening episode, although it's absolutely there. My understanding is that this series, rather than look at the Cold War, this kind of takes a similar view, but looking at the rise of fascism in modern day society. So it is doing something different in the same way that the original comics used kind of the storyline of the superheroes and all that story to kind of reflect on the Cold War. This is doing something similar. What I would say is, if you're going to go into this not having any information about the Watchmen, it's not going to hold your hand. I don't have a massive understanding of Watchmen, and I knew enough to get me through. I knew who Rorschach was. I knew who Ozymandias was. I knew who Dr. Manhattan was. So I knew those kind of those characters. So when you saw references to them, I kind of understood. Unfortunately, I kind of read up a little bit before, and I knew what the ending to the comic book was, which made the reference to it make sense, as opposed to that's weird. But it doesn't absolutely kind of, there's no previously on Watchmen at the start. That you just don't get that. What's interesting about the whole show is the fact that it's not trying to remake the original. It's not trying to make a TV series of the original show. It's trying to make a TV series in the world that the comic book existed, because what happened in the comic book will have a ripple effect throughout the following decades, and that's the idea that we're picking this up 30 years later. Where is the world now? And the reason I actually got quite more excited about it, because Damon Lindelof is someone who I think in certain areas of kind of geek culture has been given a bit of a rough time. I think he was given a bit of a rough time after Lost, because people didn't feel like it had answered all the kind of it had got so far, and then they felt a bit cheated out of it. And then certain things around Star Trek Into Darkness people didn't like, or Prometheus, and he's kind of been hit around a bit. And he released like an open letter. I'm not sure where it went to. I read it on Twitter, and it was basically a letter to fans saying, "Hi, I'm Damon Lindelof. I'm the guy who's about to destroy your comic book that you love so much. This is my story." And then he goes into the story, and it's actually a beautiful piece of writing. It's kind of really was quite moving. And he talks about throughout his life all these different touchstones of where the Watchmen's comic book has kind of come into his life, and such a close relation between his dad and the comic, and his dad bought the comic for him, and over the years, and his dad was a huge fan who bought like an unmade screenplay of the thing that he bought that as well. And it goes through this whole thing, and throughout it's saying, I'm now 35, and someone has said, we want you to write a movie, and I'm saying no. I'm now 38, and someone says, we want you to write this, and I'm saying no, because he didn't want it. He didn't feel right doing it. But he also talks about the fact of his dad passing, and that being such a strong thing between them. And it made sense, and it was a really moving piece of writing that, regardless of how it turns out, you can go into it knowing the person creating it loves the source material and is doing their very best to create something which will work for the audience of people who love the material as well. He's not just making it because someone's asked me to do this, I've been hired to do a job, here you go. It means something to him. And that, I mean, try and find it on Twitter or on online social media. It's a really fascinating kind of just a glimpse inside someone who loves a piece of source material and almost is kind of scared about doing it in the past, but their life has brought them to a point where it feels right for them to do it, and it means so much for them to do it.
I went for a run the other day, gents, and I nearly drowned whilst actually being out of water. Whilst just running, I nearly drowned because the rain was so fierce and so turbulent. I actually had that cartoon thing happen to me where a car with a caravan went through a massive puddle, and it was essentially a tidal wave came over me, and I was so wet when I got home that I put my clothes in the washing machine, and they came out of the washing machine drier than they went in.
I do like running in the rain, but that does sound like too much.
No, it was not fun at all. But it was all for a good cause.
It's always good for a good cause.
Yeah, for my own health, but also for the charity of my choice, because it's a Charity Miles update. Daniel Frost.
I don't like that theme.
Let's have a Charity Miles update, shall we? I'll make it short and sweet, but there was some big news recently. Big news in the Charity Miles circles. I think it's big news anyway. I hope you will agree. Because ourselves and our fellow team members have reached a mighty goal. This year, we have collectively travelled over 10,000 miles. And for me,
What?
for one, I think that's bloody amazing. So
10,000 miles?
a well done and a pat on the back to every single person. Yeah, that's right, 10,000 miles. Yeah.
That's a lot of miles.
That's a lot of miles. That's a lot. And that's a lot of money for charity.
What's that the equivalent of? Like, where could we have gone?
Well, I don't know that. You've never asked me that before, Sam. You asked me the number of miles and you asked me the amount of money we've raised. I have those figures. You can't just throw these on me at the last second.
Okay, so 10,000 miles is 16,000 kilometers for people listening outside of our weird combination of imperial and metric. You could go to Beijing and back, and that's 16,000 kilometers.
All right. Okay, which is what in miles?
10,000 miles.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Beijing and back.
Beijing and back.
Well,
That's not bad, is it?
We've done well. Did anyone pick up some stuff while they were there? Or?
A warm, confident, friendly pat on the back to everybody who helped us with this. If you put in 1 kilometer, if you put in, I don't know, hundreds, then, yeah, beautiful. You're beautiful.
Pete, you signed for a letter today, didn't you, in your dressing gown?
Did I?
was it a letter from a listener?
I think it was Dan.
I see the.
How many hands did you take the letter with?
Or did you just open your mouth and say, "Place it here"?
I had.
Yeah, just put
it
it
in. Put it in. So, yes, I did. I opened up the letter from Twitter, which is at Staying in Pod. You can also do the same on Facebook at Staying in Pod, and at Staying in Pod at gmail.com is the email address that you can email us on. So you can do all that, and we have one from the Lone Gamesman.
Oh, hello.
Hello, at Lone Gamesman on Twitter. So here's the question. Are established IPs, intellectual properties, a good basis for board games, or do you prefer original themes? So this is specifically, just to break this down a little bit, this is specifically for board games. I will not accept role-playing games. I know, Dan, you were just about to jump in there. And intellectual properties, we're talking about big brands. So, for example, and specifically, usually use something that has had a creator behind it. So I wouldn't class FIFA as an IP in that way, but I would class something like Watchmen, for example. I think that is an IP. So do we think that they're a good basis for board games, or do we prefer original themes? Well, I can tell you right now that I mean, part of this is my job. So I think I probably have to say yes. They make great themes, but I do genuinely think. So we actually do have a game coming out at the end of the year, and that is based on an IP, and I think that IP specifically works very well with the theme of the card game. We're making like a social deduction card game, and it's based on something around that. And so that's when you have like a detective intellectual property and you match it up with a detective style card game. I think that works really, really well. I also think, I don't know if you guys agree with me on this one, but like just taking an IP and slapping it onto something. So again, Sam's favorite game, Monopoly, very, very good over at Hasbro at just absolutely not giving any toss whatsoever in terms of the IP that they throw at Monopoly. Do you want Mario in Monopoly? All right, we'll change all the places to mushrooms. Do you want to play in the Star Wars cantina? All right, that's cool. That's what we'll replace Mayfair with. Like, it's not, that is bad. Not simply because Monopoly's a bad game, but just going, we'll just slap this license onto the top of it and hope that people buy it based on that. That's crap. Whereas if you actually work with the IP and figure out what's interesting about the IP, I think you can make it work.
In board games, there are a lot of games that take something from an IP, but as you said, Pete, the ones that do it really, really well are the ones that understand what those IPs genuinely are about. So, Battlestar Galactica is a very, very famous board game, mainly because it championed the idea that you have a Cylon amongst you. Now, as someone who's never watched Battlestar Galactica, I don't know what that means. I don't know. I just assume Cylons were just a bad person in that universe.
Yes, this hurts me personally, Sam, that you haven't watched it. But yeah, fine. Yes, they are a bad person. Yes,
but it makes a good board game because Battlestar Galactica was able to demonstrate how players can interact with other players and they've got hidden agendas. Yes. They are working for a secret side. And since Battlestar Galactica, that's been put onto lots of other original IPs. But because of the strength of that idea from the original source material, it really brought that board game to life and essentially sort of pioneered and championed a certain mechanic.
It gets to the heart of what is in, if I've watched a lot of Battlestar Galactica, and if somebody sits me down and goes, we're going to play a Battlestar Galactica board game, and there isn't some element of who is a Cylon, then you've missed the point of the series. So again, it's that nice shorthand of, oh, right, okay, yeah, I need to figure out who the baddie is. That's cool.
It's like what Dan was saying about Watchmen. It's like, are you making a Watchmen series because DC cynically want to keep the license going and stop anyone getting any money? Or has Damon Lindelof gone, hang on, I'm seeing a lot of parallels between subjects and discussion topics that were in Watchmen beforehand, and I want to use that universe to give a voice to something that I want to say. In that same way, take example Star Wars Rebellion from Fantasy Flight. That cat and mouse game between the Imperial forces and the bad guys. No, the rebels are the good guys.
That's right. And the Empire.
And the Empire. Yeah. So you can see how with that game they've gone, this is like the cat and mouse game of cat and mouses across the universe. Let's take that and use that to make the essence of our game, rather than we've got the Star Wars license, let's do Monopoly.
Intergalactic Tom and Jerry.
But there are other things like Batman Spyfall and Batman Love Letter.
Sure,
which don't really... No. That's like very much, we've got the license, let's do something.
Flux as well is good for that.
Like, to come back to the original question, like, do we prefer one or the other? Like, for me personally, like, I actually don't care. Like, original IP has a great flexibility because it means you can do anything. Whereas working with an established IP, you are set within certain confines, and that can be anything from, a Star Wars game is probably going to be a sci-fi game. It's got to have that theme. You expect a few things from it. Whereas an original IP where you've made your own thing, it's like, it could be fantasy, it could be sci-fi, it could be horror, it could be anything you want it to be, and it can mechanically be anything you want it to be. But the problem that original IP, i.e. where you've made it yourself, the problem they have is that it doesn't provide that shortcut to this is what you should be feeling.
But then I would conversely say to that is that in direct answer to the question, I do prefer original games because, I think I would love how X-Wing plays. I think I would love how Rebellion plays. I think I'd be really interested into Battlestar Galactica, but I have no connection.
Yeah.
I have no shorthand to Star Wars or Battlestar Galactica.
So if I subjected you to my Napoleonic fleet game, Sails of Glory, Sam, which literally is X-Wing, it's the exact same mechanics, would you be more tempted to play Sails of Glory, or would you be more tempted to play X-Wing? And literally they are the same game. They are the same mechanics, same systems, same movement, same everything, except one of them is 17th century wooden boats, and one of them is futuristic laser firing airships, spaceships.
Well, it might not be futuristic. Actually, no, it's a long, long time ago.
It's a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away.
Famously.
It's older than
Oh,
those boats.
God.
I think you're fine.
But I found in some situations, actually, that it's not just about me, but also what turns me off some IPs is the fact that even if I'm interested in the IP, there's no one around who would play that with me.
Sure.
Most of my games are original in the sense that for example, I own Burgle Brothers. Having a board game which is Ocean's 11, the board game, I would never pick up.
Right.
But having something that evokes the sensation of Ocean's 11, but other heist narratives is more interesting. And Sam's perfectly right. I've always wanted to play Rebellion, but A, it's a big box. A, it costs a lot of money. And I'm not that in love with Star Wars.
Congratulations! It's another episode of the Staying In podcast done and dusted. This one featured Kris Darby, Daniel Frost, Peter Willington, and myself, Sam Turner. I want to say, first off, a huge thank you to everyone at Arcane Wonders for supporting the show and sending us a copy of the superb Air, Land and Sea. It comes very highly recommended by Kris and myself. It gets us staying in. Pat on the back. Talking of pats on the back, congratulations to Peter Willington, who appeared on a couple of other podcasts while we weren't looking recently. He was on the superb Link to the Cast and the amazing We're Not Wizards podcast recently. So if you can't get enough of the dressing gown gruff that we know as Peter Willington, then check him out on Link to the Cast or We're Not Wizards. If you can't get enough of us, then please tell your friends. It's the best way that we can grow and get bigger and bring you the best games and comics and TVs and films that we know that we think you might like. So tell your friends. You can also send us a question on Twitter, Instagram, email. All the details are on the website, stayinginpodcast.com. But that's it from us for now. We'll be back very soon. But until then, bye-bye.